Greetings from Utah. Today I want to talk about my experience learning ancient Greek in Greece this past summer with a college called Ralston. It was not only the best trip of my life, but also one of the best learning experiences I've had. And part of the purpose of this video is to let you know that Ralston College is hosting the same program again. So you also have an opportunity this summer, 2025, to study ancient Greek in Greece. And the deadline for application is about mid-February. If you're interested, I'll leave the link in the comments below to apply. And you can just Google Ralston College Humanities MA if you're interested too. Full disclosure, I'm not being paid a single dime to make this video. There's no revenue sharing or anything like that. Partially because there's no revenue, since it's a fully funded program. All of your tuition, your housing, get a monthly stipend, all that is covered by very generous philanthropists. And so maybe what I'll do today is I'll first explain why I was interested in studying ancient Greek. It's a very odd thing to be interested in, and why you might be as well. And then I'll talk about why I think Ralston is one of the best programs to do that in the world right now. So I wanted to study ancient Greek initially at least, for purely scholarly reasons. I know classical Chinese, and I took a class, an English language class, on the Chinese classics at Columbia, and we read the Analects in English. And it was a completely different book than when you read it in classical Chinese. And so because of how much I like Greek philosophy, I wanted to access these thinkers in an unmediated way. And so when it comes to learning languages, one thing I think you should think about is the bang for your buck, okay, to put it very bluntly. Because some languages like French, they translate extremely well. You are losing things in translation from French to English, but nowhere near as much as you lose from ancient Greek to English. Another thing is that translations are often wrong. I was reading Plato's Republic, the Loeb edition, and they translated a sentence saying that democracy degenerates into democracy. But anyone with a basic understanding of the Republic knows that it's oligarchy that degenerates into democracy. And lo and behold, I checked the original text with the ancient Greek, and the translation, like as simple an error as that, just mistranslating a literal word, often happens. And so that's the reason why I wanted to learn it. Now, when I came out of this program, there was a second reason that emerged of why I think it's valuable to learn ancient Greek. That's even more important than the first scholarly one, which is that learning ancient Greek, I think, turns you Greek. It changes who you are. It brings you into one of the most creative civilizations that the world has ever seen. And I do think it's quite interesting that not only did ancient Greek as a language, not only was it the foundation of one of the most vibrant, creative, intellectual cultures in the world, but as soon as in the Renaissance they rescued these texts, they again, in the Renaissance, created another huge intellectual flourishing. And so by learning ancient Greek, you become Greek in the sense that knowing a language changes you. It changes how you relate to that culture. And maybe a good example here is memorization, right? So in the 21st century, we think, why do I have to memorize things? I can just pull up anything on my phone at a moment's notice. But memorization is not just about being able to recall certain useless facts, but it's about who you become when you embody certain forms of knowledge. So let me give you an example. I'm very glad now, I sure as hell was not in the time, that my Chinese teachers in my primary and secondary education forced me to memorize the Chinese classics. Because memorizing those difficult poems is not just about being able to recall a few fancy sentences, but it's about turning your character poetic. Okay, believe it or not, my character was even less poetic than I am now before I was forced to memorize the Chinese classics. And so it's something like that when it comes to learning ancient Greek. That it's not just about knowing the language. It's not just about being able to pick up Plato and read it properly. It's about knowing the language that changes your life in some fundamental way. And I think this insight about how learning a language can change your being is also why the Ralston program is so special. Because Ralston truly treats Greek, ancient Greek, as a living language and a language to be lived, okay? And there's at least 3 ways that you can see this. The first and most obvious way is that you are living in Greece while you're doing this program. You are learning ancient Greek in Greece. And so some of the fondest memories I have from this summer was attending a lecture on Pythagoras in the cave that allegedly on Samos, Pythagoras taught his students in. Or it's discussing Socrates with the friends I made in the program in the Agora, right? Or it's, so even just a month in, your ancient Greek is good enough to struggle through John, the Gospel John. And so we read Revelations, sorry, not the Gospel John, we read Revelations, and we went to the cave where John received his revelations on Patmos, I believe the island is called. And there's something to be said about being in a place where the thought was originally generated that gives you a much more profound and embodied form of knowledge of that thought and culture. And so it's almost as if something even after 2,000 years is still lingering in the air, okay? And so in the first sense, this program is a truly lived program is because you'll travel across that entire region. We stayed first on an island for 3 weeks, Samos. We toured all the neighboring islands on the weekends. We did a week in Constantinople, now known as Istanbul. And then we spent the rest month, it was a whole 2-month program, in the Peloponnese, in Nafplio specifically. And there again, we toured all the most important sites on the weekends when we weren't studying and drilling ancient Greek 24/7. The second sense in which Ralston treats this as a lived program is that their pedagogy is extremely unique. When you learn the classics today, what you get is essentially drilling grammar tables, is essentially treating it as a science, right? First, you learn all these different kind of word endings, then you memorize all this kind of vocab, and then you just read the text, right? The teacher just guides you in reading the text. Ralston has a very, what at first glance must appear odd method of reading the classics, which is that you're forced to read it out loud, to speak it, to listen to it, and to produce it, to write it in addition to reading it. Now, you might wonder, as I did, what's the point of doing the other 3 things, right? Speaking, listening, writing, if all I want to do is to be able to read the Greek text. And I think the key insight is that the way humans learn language cannot be cut cannot be fully, cleanly cut in these 4 different buckets. And that if you want to properly read Plato, you also have to be able to speak ancient Greek in your life. And so one example is there was a classics professor who was partially teaching, partially attending the program with us, and he's been reading Plato for about 20 years at that point. And he told me that after 20 years of reading Plato in the way that most people are taught the classics in ancient Greek today, he's still translating Plato. So he's still treating Plato as a puzzle to be solved. Like this word ending is about the plural, dative, and this word refers to this word. That's not how we read English. When I say he hit the ball or the ball hit him, you don't think, oh, he's the nominative, him is the accusative. It just intuitively makes sense to you. And that's what the Ralston pedagogy is supposed to get you to eventually, is to make ancient Greek, to treat it as a modern language that is not just to be read, but to be spoken, to be listened to be used into your daily life. And so you're actually, and I was one of the more fanatic students here, you're actually forced to, encouraged, I'll say, I forced others to speak ancient Greek in the program, even when you're not in class. And I can't tell you how important that part of the program was, that the intuition it built into you, right? And this goes back to the idea that language is not just a set of random facts, but it's the most intimate thing to be embodied. Okay. And what I think added a lot of comfort to this pedagogy, which again seems quite weird for a dead language to speak it with people, is that, it's not just, the crazy Ralston fanatics just came out with this pedagogy. This is actually something that is rescued. So in the Renaissance, this is the method that people use to, again, properly not just learn Greek, ancient Greek, the language, but to embody and to become Greek. This is the method they use, and not the kind of German scientific, let's memorize charts and vocabs and table kind of approach. And so what's critical about their pedagogy is that I think they rightfully treat translation, right? Again, think about the classics professor. He says, I'm still translating Plato. I'm still not reading Plato. They treat translation rightfully, I think, as another form of mediation that you need to break through, right? It's not as bad a form of mediation as reading the English version of it, but it's another form of mediation that that disembodies the text, let me put it that way, that prevents the embodying from happening. Okay. That's the second way in which it's lived, which is that they treat it as a modern language to be spoken, to be discussed, to be used in everyday life. The third way that it is they treat it as lived, are the people who is running the program, many of whom I've become friends with. Many times today, many classics programs today, especially the very good elite ones, are quite hostile actually to the tradition that they're teaching. And sometimes for good reasons, whether they're misogynistic or they're colonial or they promote vengeance. And I mean, I studied with some of the greatest critical theorists of our era, and I definitely think there's value into a sort of critical tradition that takes a step back. But that's not where you want to begin, studying a tradition. You'd much rather study it with die-hard fanatics who will defend the tradition, tooth and claw, everything about the tradition. And then once you absorb that tradition, and then you can think, okay, I'm gonna reject this part, I'm gonna bring on this part. And the people running the Ralston program and a lot of the students they attract are, perhaps to a fault, Hellenophiles. They are in love with ancient Greece, ancient Greek culture, and the culture that of the West that has sprung from it. And that, I think, is both refreshing and a good starting point, because their love for the tradition will rub off on you. Okay, so those are the three things that I think make the Ralston program extra special compared to other ways you can learn ancient Greek today. So I hope that was interesting and relevant. Again, if you want to apply, I'll leave the link in the description below. And I'll also, you can just Google Ralston Humanities MA. Maybe I mentioned this already, but this is actually a one-year MA program. And so in the summer, you spend your time in Greece, just focus on ancient Greek. That's the part I did. And the rest, 3 semesters, the rest of the year, it's all fully funded. You are in a beautiful campus in Savannah, Georgia, learning the great books. I didn't have time to do that, so I just did the Greek portion because now I need to come back and actually do the Greek lectures and interviews, which I'm doing right now. Okay, that's it. That's it for my rant today. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.